For the past few weeks, this is what nights have been like for some people in Israel, as rockets were fired from Gaza towards cities and towns.
You have about a minute to gather your children and run to the bomb shelter. And then you just wait and you hear explosions and you just don't know. Like, you check your phone and you just wait to hear some news.
Israel has a missile defence system which stops around 90% of the rockets mid-air. But Gaza doesn't, and Israeli bombs mostly hit their targets.
So yesterday I was again in my room working and then there was an airstrike, a big sound, followed by my niece screaming. This is the international sign of children now in Gaza to close their ears so they can't hear the sounds.
In the past 2 weeks, at least 13 Israelis and more than 200 Palestinians have been killed and many more injured in some of the worst fighting this region has seen in years. To understand what's going on, let's take a look at a map. This is Israel, and here's Gaza, and over here is the West Bank and East Jerusalem. They're known as the Palestinian territories. They have their own leadership, and people here speak mostly Arabic. But not every country recognises Palestine as a separate state. And for many decades, there's been tension and violence between people in this part of the world. Let's go back to that map. Before 1948, there was no Israel. All of this area was known as Palestine, and it was under the control of the Ottoman Empire and then Britain. The people who lived here were from different ethnic groups. The majority were Arab Muslims, but there was also Christians and Jews, all of which consider the area to be sacred. After the First World War, more Jewish people started to migrate there and buy land. Many wanted to create a Jewish state in the ancient home of their ancestors, but that led to tensions with the Palestinians who had lived on the land for a long time. Then came the Second World War, and with it, the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis in Europe, and the world was horrified. After the war, the newly created United Nations came up with a plan to split Palestine into 2 states, one for Palestinians and one for Jews, including many Holocaust survivors. But the plan gave the much larger Palestinian population less than half of the land. And Palestinian and other Arab leaders rejected it. In 1948, Jewish leaders declared Israel an independent state, and fighting broke out. During the war, many Palestinians fled their homes and ended up as refugees in Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and neighbouring countries. By the end of the war, the new Israeli state had claimed more land than the UN had originally assigned to them. In 1967, there was another war, which Israel won, and then took control of Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank. Since then, there have been times of violence. There have been some steps forward, when it seemed like the two sides would work together to find a solution, and some steps backwards. Today, many Palestinians are angry with the harsh rules and restrictions put on them by Israel. Israel controls Gaza's borders, which makes it hard for people and things like food and supplies to come in and out. It has soldiers in the West Bank, and over the years it's let more Jewish Israelis settle there. Palestinians who live inside Israel say they face discrimination. On the other side, Israeli Jews say they face a constant threat of violence. Since 2007, Gaza has been ruled by a militant group called Hamas, which doesn't recognise Israel's right to exist. Israel blamed Hamas for firing the first rockets in this latest conflict and says, unlike Hamas's rockets, its airstrikes are targeted and it's trying to avoid hurting innocent people. But many innocent people have been hurt, and Israel's been criticised for using its much stronger military power against the Palestinians. Around the world, leaders have been calling for peace.
Fighting must stop.
The United States calls on all parties to ensure the protection of civilians.
We urge both sides to show extreme restraint.
Now, to everyone's relief, that's happened. Last week, Israel and Hamas called a ceasefire, and for now, the fighting has stopped. And many are hoping the peace will last.